Mr. Sanderson. Good day. How are you, friend?
Good, brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Hey, I really appreciate you wanting to come on the show and talk with me today and tell some stories. Um, right before we started recording, we were talking, and I said, I think you've got an interesting story. You've done a bunch. You like that. I know that there's at least one story here to be told, and I think it can be a good one. So, uh, just kind of by way of introduction, you are currently a nurse practitioner. You work in an emergency room, and you also work in an urgent care, if I remember that correct, or not so much.
Just the ER right now, and then
Just
I
the
do a
ER
little
right
bit
now.
of contracting with a local um, assisted living facility. So go in there
Okay.
and do a few things there.
Okay. Cool. Well, you've been a nurse practitioner for how long now? Just over a year, isn't it?
Yeah, just over a year. I started last August at the ER. Obviously, before that, I'd worked as a nurse for quite a
Right.
few years in that. But yeah, so I graduated from the University of South Alabama. They had a dual role program. So I did both the adult acute care, it's adult gerontological acute care, and F&P. There's kind of a little bit of a story behind that of why I did that. And then the goal was always to kind of be back in the ER where I felt real comfortable. So then I've been with those guys since August of last year. So
Cool.
different role, kind of same spot, but
Yeah.
it's a nice change for me for sure.
So, in the interest of openness and transparency, you and I have worked together as nurses. You and I worked at the same hospital for a period of time. That way, our audience knows what's
Yeah.
what and what our relationship kind of is. Um, so, you got your nurse practitioner. What made you want to go from being a bedside care nurse in an emergency room to switching to the provider role?
Um, so there's a lot that kind of goes into that for me. I was in kind of a transition period with I was coming out of the service. I had done and kind of reached all the goals that I wanted to through my National Guard career, and everything that I wanted to try and do with the 19th Special Forces Group. And I kind of came back home, and it was one of those, what do I want to do now with the rest of my life? I'm a pretty motivated person. I feel like there's always room for growth and opportunity. And I'd been an RN for about 12 years before I become an NP. And kind of leading up to that, I had done a master's degree in nurse management administration. I looked at the administrative role, and the further I got away from taking care of people, the least I enjoyed it. All the meetings and just the bureaucracy of trying to make changes that I felt were necessary were almost impossible to accomplish with, the role that they would put you in and what they wanted you to accomplish and do. Sometimes your goals didn't really line up. So I didn't really find that worth pursuing. And the role I was currently in at the time was I was doing half as the clinical coordinator and then half on the floor, which was a good mix because I got to, help shape the unit, but at the same time, I still got to work on the unit. So I wasn't detached like a lot of administrators become. But kind of looking back, it was one of those, is this really the furthest I want to go, or what do I want to do? And is this it? And I was talking with a kind of a friend of a friend who had done the University of South Alabama's program and spoke very highly of it and had gotten his doctorate through there, and said they have an online program. I mean, a lot of it is a ton of self-learning. I mean, you have to be really self-motivated and have to really kind of jump in. You arrange your clinicals, they have all the criteria and stuff that you're able to do, and you have to go down there a few times a year. So that was pretty interesting for me. So I looked into it and decided, if I had reached kind of the goals and what aligned with my family, with the military, what I wanted to do. And so really kind of moved into that. And so kind of the story behind why the dual role for me, I'd always kind of wanted to go into the ER. And there's a lot of times, at least, and I'm sure you've experienced this, if you look in your life of things that have changed the path that you've taken, whether it's, you know, a podcast or where you worked or, you know, what profession you went into or where you bought a house or what you did, a lot of it is a simple conversation with somebody. And if you can kind of pinpoint where that decision was made. And so I was walking down the hallway and I was talking with Ryan Stolworthy, he's one of the physicians I work with. And I just said, yeah, man, I'm signing up. I'm going to do a nurse practitioner program. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. And I told him I was going to do this adult acute care because I thought, man, I want to be, you know, an acute care MP and put in central lines and do chest tubes and kind of do some of that stuff. And he said, well, and I'd already signed up. I already put the application in. I was in and I'd been accepted. Committed. I was committed. And so it was kind of one of those things where, it was kind of one of those things where it was like, oh yeah, this is the path. I didn't, you know, because it's online, you don't have an office you can go into and say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to be. I just thought, man, acute care is better than just, you know, family, and I can do more, you get trained a little bit more, but I don't see any problem. And Ryan goes, yeah, be careful with that. I don't think they do pediatrics, so an ER won't hire you. And like my heart just like sunk, and I was like, oh.
That's a big consideration.
I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, you'd only be licensed to take care of people 18 and older. So any pediatric patient you legally wouldn't be able to take because you wouldn't do any peds rotations. And I'm so used to the nurse mentality of like an RN is an RN, like right. You can be on a helicopter or you can be at a nursing home. And then 2 weeks later, you could be in a NICU. Yeah. It didn't really matter. And I was like, oh crap, bro. Like, I was like,
that's a huge consideration.
Yeah. So I email, I don't even know these people's names. Like I'm such a people person, like talking with people and like I can make things happen, but like just get me in front of somebody and I can just talk with them and kind of work it over. But I mean, here I am instantly just like, oh, and now I just like randomly looking on the website of the program I'm in of like, who is the clinical director? Sure. Okay, let's try that one.
Jane
and I'm like, hey, fun little facts. I want to work ER. They didn't have an ENP program yet. Like that was in development. And they're like, oh yeah, what we recommend for people who want to do ER is this dual role because you get both the family outpatient stuff and you get the inpatient. And so she said, you can apply and see if you can transfer over. And so she sent me the little link. I applied. And then luckily, like a week later, I get an email saying like, yep, you've been accepted. There was a spot. You were high enough up or whatever it was.
Good for you.
Dropped you out of the acute care. But I nearly started a whole program not knowing what the hell I was doing. Because
doesn't that always seem to happen to people like us? Like we're like, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. Well, there was nobody there, you know, in front of me. Nobody, you know, like, oh, we're all in nursing school together. Like, I'll just go ask the teacher, hey, what did you do for this test? You know? Yeah. Oh, our assignment's due tomorrow. Oh crap. You know, so none of that was there for me. And that's kind of how I got through a lot of things. And so it was definitely interesting, but that's how I got into be a dual role, adult gerontological acute care / FNP. And so I had to take 2 sets of boards, pay like the money twice for each board. But I will be honest, the FNP board I thought was harder than the acute care board.
Really?
Just because it was so broad. Right. Your FNP board had everything from what is the third treatment for acne to what birth control you put this girl on to.
It's a generalist.
Huge, and it was just like one random little nugget out of this pocket, or what do you do with this derm condition? And I was just like, can we just like sepsis? Give me sepsis or something.
Give me a trauma case that I can work through. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I've enjoyed it. It's been first year has been a huge kick in the butt, man. I mean, it's been quite an experience. It's a whole different change of mindset.
Yeah.
I really
Sure.
found that I had mastered as an RN, becoming extremely efficient at, and it's kind of sad to say, but with the computerized charting, with the systems that we have in place, and with you have a large corporation that says, I don't want, 60 RNs in this unit kind of doing things independently, thought process based of what they feel is best. I'm going to give them guidelines, and I want you to do A, B, and C. And you can kind of switch the order up a little bit, but like these tasks need to be done. You need to do a
Right.
triage. You need to do this assessment. You need to do this, this, and this. And so I became extremely efficient, but honestly, I felt like, I'm throwing in lines, getting labs, getting your analysis, and then, pushing some medicines, and that's kind of it. And
Yeah.
so I felt that it was a nice transition over to, and you come into the ER and I have to, in your mind, you want me to tell you what this is. And in my mind, I need to rule out all these deadly things that you could have. And then
Right.
once I find that you don't have any of those, I need to then move over to, okay, what could this be? And then kind of another point that you don't really think about is I have to give you value. I have to show you, you're going to get a bill typically around, I would imagine, 1,800 to $3,000. And you came in with, some chronic abdominal pain or, something. And I have to go in and tell you that there's nothing acute going on, but I have to explain to you all the results and the value of what I actually looked for and what I did.
Yeah.
So that connection with the patient and building that trust is I think is pretty awesome. So that's kind of a different change where they're paying to get my opinion and to get my expertise on what I feel like this is, and then I get to help them in a way as well. So
Yeah.
it's a good transition for me. It's not that I didn't help people, obviously, as a nurse. That's obviously a huge part of the role, but they come in now to see you, to get an answer, to get some help, to get some treatment on something, and so
Yeah.
to be able to provide it has been really cool.
Yeah.
So.
And not to diminish the bedside RN role, but they don't come to the RN for answers, right?
Yeah.
The RN is the hand holder. The RN is the get stuff done person.
Yeah.
Whereas the provider, whether it be nurse practitioner, physician assistant, or a physician, they're the answers people. They're the ones in the answers business.
So I've been in meetings and stuff before. I'd worked really close with this physician group, and in one of the meetings, one of the docs said, and I agreed with it. It was a kind of a hard pill to swallow as an RN, is people don't come to the ER. They come to the ER to see the doc.
Right.
That is their whole goal. They're not there to see Intermountain. They're not there, to see the nurse. They're there. They want to tell their story. They want to see somebody. And it was when we were looking at process changes. And so having it be provider centric, of instead of having them go through all these different layers and tell their story over and over again, and then it gets to the doc, of let's put the doc up front. So they come in, they see the doc, and then we get things rolling. Was kind of a change that we made in the ER. And so it's kind of based on that centric belief of putting that provider there up front and first in that. So that was kind of that goal behind it. So
yeah. So something else that you and I share together is that we're both veterans, and you're very active in the veteran community. Happy Veterans Day to you, belated.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service. Stroke each other a little bit there. So you and you hinted to some of your career, and I just recently learned more about your career from a third party video that you did recently for Veterans Day, where you talked about your experience as enlisted man, and then you had a break in service and you came back as an officer. You ended up with 19th Group Special Forces, which is out of Camp Williams in Utah. What made you what made you go from being enlisted dude to, I want to be an officer with the Special Forces?
So I had done 6 years in enlisted stints as a combat and field medic. I mean, I joined when I was 17, the local unit there in Price. And we had gotten deployed in 03, 04 with the invasion in Iraq. And at the time, I mean, I was, finished high school. I was a couple years out. I was married. I had a kid. I was trying to get going in college and a few things. And I was starting to do maybe some prereqs for nursing. And then we got deployed, and it kind of pulled me away from that. We did 15 months total. And I really,
which wasn't long for that time.
Yeah, and that was a pretty standard. That was when they introduced the 12 months boots on the ground.
Yeah.
But we had all our pre-deployment stuff just waiting for the war to start and everything, and trying to get a window to get into Kuwait so that we could push up right there. And we were a few weeks behind the initial invasion. So we were sitting in Kuwait waiting for the war to kick off. And so it was kind of one of those, I spent a lot of time there. I mean, we did a ton of missions. We did a ton of stuff. But the Army, had been, and I know this sounds kind of selfish, but I mean, it hugely interrupted. It pulled me away from the family. And so there was this sacrifice there. And so when I came home, I was really, really motivated to continue on with my life. And I got into the nursing program and really just really kind of put my life on track so that I could, provide for the family and kind of move into an actual career.
Right.
And everybody, when we were in Iraq and our unit was like, because we got it wasn't organized, but, it was all at the beginning and we never knew how long. And so we kind of got jerked around a little bit, and everybody was like, man, I'm out. As soon as my enlistment's done, man, I'm out of here. Like, all this type of stuff. And so much had changed. Like, we had all left as just Pogue, National Guard, had never done anything. So now all of us come back and we have, 300 plus missions of combat experience and, seen a lot, have done a lot.
Right.
And then we go back to the Guard life of like, hey, this weekend we're going to mess around with the radios. And it's like, what in the heck is it? Like, come on.
What are we
like,
doing here?
I was like,
yeah,
it didn't waste my time, but it was one of those situations where it pulled me away from my family. And so that time was so valuable. And because I had lost that, I wanted to make the most of what I have. And so after my 6 years, I was one of the few, I was just finishing up nursing, or I was in the middle of nursing. I was like, no, I'm not re-enlisting. Like, they had offered me an E5 position with a new unit they were starting with this new medical unit, and I could get these promotions on fast track for E6, how they offered it. But it was a guaranteed at least another deployment. And I was like, to go do what? Like, what are we accomplishing? Like, it was even by that time, it was like, okay, we won the war, we invaded, we got the regime out, we freed these people. Now we just sat there for the next 10 months, getting blown up rotate, and trying to improve infrastructure. And now it's been a couple years since then. We're training the Iraqi army. Afghanistan now has been going for 5-6 years. Iraq's been going for 3 years, and it was like, they're doing a rotation with this new unit they're plussing up. And I was like, thanks, but no, you're going to pull me out of another year of school. I got pulled out of a spring semester and then a full year, and then we came back in the middle of a spring semester, so I couldn't start again until the next fall. So I had missed, almost 2 years of school.
Yeah.
And so
that's probably the number one thing that I hear from folks that say they got out or had a break in service is that it's not necessarily that the military asked too much of them. It's that the military took too much from them.
And that's what it was for me. It was just like, I don't want to, my priority was now back on my family when I was doing that. So I graduated, we moved up to Cache Valley. I got out of the service, and for me, it was special forces had always been something of interest for me, because it was the hardest. And then I was doing Ironmans at the time. I was like racing Lodija. I was doing some marathons, and I was in this mindset of in my 20s where it was like, oh, well, this seems hard. Like, well, yeah, I should be able to do that.
Right.
And so, like, I was in the newspaper because I did Lodija one weekend and then the top of Utah Marathon the next weekend. And I had never done either. And I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. But ended up, Lodija was awesome. But I was really surprised how torn up my legs were for the marathon.
So let's clarify. Lodija is Logan to Jackson. It's a bike race between Logan, Utah and Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
That is correct. It's 206 miles in one day. It's one of the longest single stage
races in America.
Races. And so I'd done that, I completed, then I did the marathon. So that my mindset at that time, and this is kind of that development of mindset that I'm sure we'll talk about more of, you know, I felt like I could really just do anything that I wanted to. And then I read a book, Lone Survivor. And I know the movie came out and everybody, you know, thought it was awesome. And I looked at these guys and you know, here I am running, you know, I could go out and run 10 to 12 miles at any point during the day at any time. And you know, my paces were really strong. I mean, I could do, you know, I could max anything that I needed to. I was just in incredible shape, especially a lot of endurance stuff. And so I read the book, and coming from a strong military background with both my parents, my brother, my uncle, and my grandfather, all serving, I felt like this obligation of like, man, I could do special operations. And at the time, my brother was full-time Army, and he had gotten out of full and was in the Guard, and it was the 197th Special Troops Company, and it was an airborne unit, and they were actually underneath.
Out of Ogden, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were underneath. They were like a specialized little company, almost like a support company, underneath like JSOC, you know.
Yeah, they fell under
umbrella.
The Special Operations umbrella, yeah.
Yeah, and so they would get pulled to pull, you know, support for different special operations missions. And my brother was an officer, and you know, airborne and the whole deal. And he's like, I went to him, I said, man, I think it'd be awesome to go through SF. And he's like, well, why don't you become airborne, join our unit, that type of stuff. We're actually getting absorbed by the 19th. They were just developing the group support battalions. So each group was going to get a whole battalion of support. And they were building the 19th at the time. And so I went and talked to him, and I said, well, yeah, like, you know, we'd love to have you. We have a nurse slot for you. And I remember I got advice from my father, and he said, whatever you do, like I went and talked to a recruiter about SEALs, and I talked to a recruiter about doing just straight SF, like signing an SF contract. I would go in enlisted. I would go in as an 18 Delta.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was going to be through the X-ray program or not, where it already had prior service.
Right.
But I would just get pushed straight into the pipeline and go as an 18 Delta designator and go through the school to earn that title. But my father said, think of the worst case scenario and make sure you're okay with that. Meaning, if you're in school and you snap a tib fib, are you okay still, you know, because if you sign that contract and you do, you know, and something happens during the 18 Delta, you know, they're going to go just push you into an infantry unit. Now you're going to be an E4, maybe an E5, sitting at Fort Bragg somewhere in the 82nd Airborne. If you did a full-time, if you did a National Guard, I mean, they kind of just put you wherever.
Right.
And he said, so whatever the worst case scenario is, make sure that you're okay with that. And really kind of providing for my family. It was one of those deals, like, over here, I can take a commission as a first lieutenant, go through all this training as a first lieutenant captain, and make decent money enough to at least support my family versus an E4, which was very little.
Yeah.
You know, I'd be taking, you know, at least a half cut in my pay to go do this, and it would be a large burden on the family. And so I took the commission. I had a master's degree at the time in nurse management administration. And I just went in there just wanting to just destroy everything. Like, I didn't want to be the best at the PT test. I wanted to, whatever the company record was, I wanted to demolish it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, whatever the standard was, I remember wanting to do 100 push-ups in 2 minutes, 100 sit-ups in 2 minutes, and run, you know, a sub 12-minute 2 mile for the PT test, and just try to max everything out to the best that I could. And it's weird in the Army, it doesn't really matter what type of leader you are, but if you're really good at shooting and fitness, then they're just like, oh, he's a great leader.
Yeah. They automatically,
it's
they automatically say, oh yeah.
You could be the best at your job, but if you miss weight and you fail a PT test, and like, that dude is
You're
automatically
garbage.
a PT, yeah, you know?
Yeah.
And so for me, like, I just went in and I went to airborne school. And, you know, while I was there, I remember calling my commander and saying, like, send me to Ranger school. Like, I'm already here, send the orders. And he's like, Jake, we can't, you know, because the guard has to pay for it. And so I made it through airborne school. And then, you know, they sent me to air assault school, and I was able to do really well at that. And then it was just a matter of time until I went to selection. I actually got hurt the first time and broke my ankle, and then went back to selection and got selected. And so the next thing you know, like, what kind of turned into of like, I bet you I could do that. I bet you I could pass this, and I could max this out. Oh, that seems really hard, man. I bet you I could do that. Now it turned into, I remember that epiphany sitting there when they pull the group aside and they call out the roster numbers of a few guys to go get boarded. And at the end of selection, they pull a few other guys out that don't make it. And there's a group of you left. And out of like the 50 officers that started, there was like 11 of us left. And I just remember them just saying, like, all right, you guys, you've been selected to go to the queue. And everybody's like, oh, that's so awesome. He's like, all right, but now it begins. And I remember saying to myself, like, oh shit. Like,
Yeah.
this is now real.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a direct commissioned male nurse. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be here. And after I read like some of the regulations and stuff, but really I wasn't supposed to be, because as a direct commission, you're not supposed to take a command. And obviously you're on a command track to do, you know, that of an ODA. And so I just remember thinking, like, this is different for me than all of these other buddies that I just met and all these other guys, because they're in the Army. I'm just this National Guard guy working at a hospital, and almost on like a bet, other guys in my unit, I told them, heck yeah, dude, I can pass selection.
Yeah.
I was like, well, go try it. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm going next weekend. And I'd go to the rec company and I passed, and then, you know, they were just like, pick a day, whenever you want to go to selection, just go. And that's like kind of how casual it was. And they just put a packet together, and next thing you know, I'm on an airplane to Camp McCall, right next to Bragg, and I'm doing selection with all these like West Pointers and people that have been in the Army like 5-6 years full time. And then next thing you know, I passed, and it was just like,
now what?
oh, great, now what? So, you know, we packed the family up, we moved to Fort Bragg. I had no idea even where I was going. I just had some orders. I remember showing up at Fort Bragg and just like driving around, going into buildings, being like, do you know what I do with this? They're like, where's your leave form, sir? And I was just like, hey, man, like, I don't have a leave form.
They told me to show up here.
What do you mean you don't have a leave form? I was like, dude, I was working in a hospital last week, man. Like, it wasn't like I took leave and traveled here from a unit. And they were just like, what in the hell? And so here I am as like a first lieutenant at Fort Bragg, and I'm at the at the captain's career course with all these West Pointers and all these captains. And I had maybe read an op order. I'd never written one. I'd never done any of that. And it turned into the greatest fake it till you make it.
Oh man. And we've all been there.
Of all time for me. And it was just like, I just said, well, no matter what, dude, if I just bust my ass and I just work really, really hard, I'll be able to do this. And made it through. And there was a huge change of mindset. I was about a year in. I had passed SUT, I passed SEER school, I passed phase 1, captain's career course, and I was in the MOS phase, and I had a nice drive home, every day. It was like a 35-minute drive. And I just really, really remember thinking about what do I really want? And then once I was able to see the kids are home.
Kids made it home.
Yeah. Once I was actually able to see what it was I was doing, I thought to myself, is this sacrifice going to be worth it? And they kind of laid it out to us. For the next 6 years, you're going to be gone probably 3 to 4 of it. In between deployments, Ranger school would be next. After that, Halo school, pre-deployment, you would get deployed, go to a shooting school, then come back, get deployed. You'd be gone 6 months with a 2-month, demo kind of period. And so every calendar year, it looked like 8 to 10 months of it, I would be out of school, at training, or gone in a foreign country somewhere.
Right. And second and 19th had responsibility over like Southwest Asia at that time.
Yeah. And so I looked at, okay, am I going to get a cool guy mission, doing something that was really cool. And I talked with a buddy of mine, and he was doing like a joint training mission in the Philippines, and they had some roadside bomb, and it had killed his senior medic and a few things. And he had a lot of frustration with it of like, what are we doing? Like, is this sacrifice really worth it? And I was reading a lot of books, because they make you read a ton of books, and
right.
At least as an officer you do. And was doing some training mission with a Filipino special forces worth this amount of time? And at the time I was coaching my son's T-ball league, or coach pitch, and I was able to go to a few games and stuff because we were in between phases. And I had a lot of time to kind of spend kind of analyzing that and looking at it. And it still to this day has been the hardest decision. And it was one that I don't think anybody understood. My father surely didn't understand it. My brother didn't understand it. But I made the decision after a year of being there, of passing everything, first time goes on everything. It wasn't a matter of that. But for me, it was a matter of, is this going to be worth that sacrifice to my family? Like I already pulled them out here to North Carolina, just so that I could say, look, I did it. I have a tab. I have a Green Beret. Are the missions that I'm going to be doing and the sacrifices, does that equate to each other?
Right.
To get my career at the hospital, to do this, and the sacrifices of the family, to have a National Guard SF unit, and it's nothing against them, and I know they do some cool missions and stuff, but were those going to be, and then the idea of, oh man, we're going to kick down doors and do really cool stuff versus what an SF captain really does. That reality was kind of hitting me.
Right.
It's, a lot of paperwork and meetings and getting your butt chewed and trying to plan these missions. And then, you end up doing missions that you don't think are quite as cool and high speed as you see in the movies.
Right.
And so I walked into this major's office, and I said, hey, sir, I just don't think this is for me. I don't want to do this anymore. And a lot of thought, a lot of consideration had gone into it. And like, his mind was just blown. He's like, what? He's like, you know, this is going to ruin your career. I was like, look, man, I'm literally going to go home next week and start at the hospital again.
I'm
like,
going to have a full-time job.
Yeah. Like, because for the West Pointers, it ruins your career. If they fail out, they don't have an OER rating time.
Yeah.
And they will not get promoted, and they will get kicked out not kicked out, but they won't get promoted. And then
it's a scarlet letter.
Out. Yeah. And so if you miss any school, or like, if you don't have, a certificate saying you completed that school, or you have rating time on an OER, you're done.
Yeah.
And so for me as a National Guard, it was like, look, I'm a medical officer. I get promoted no matter what if I want to stay in.
Right.
I have no student loans. I'm not getting anything other than a guard check from them. I don't have, like, that's not my career. I really don't care about that. And he was like,
what?
He didn't understand. He's like, well, no, you have to do this, and then you take this command, and then you go to the S shop, and then you become a major, and then maybe if you're lucky, you go to battalion, and then you can maybe get light colonel. And I was just like,
I can make light colonel in my sleep as an MSC.
Well, then it was like, I don't have a goal of making. I don't care. My goal was to kick down doors and shoot bad people in the face, because I felt like if I could be there with a team, I could help my fellow soldier, whoever, if they got hurt, if something happened. That medic mentality for me was always there, even as the officer.
Right.
I was like, I just want to, like, do as much as I can and help as many people as I can. And so that was kind of that decision. So I had gone through some super cool training. I had done really, really cool things, and proven through, because I had really gone through a lot of the physical stuff already through SUT and through SEER school, and phase 1 is more just physical stuff. I really didn't have anything left to prove. And then it was kind of like, if you do this, you're going to end up doing 20 years. And I was coming up to kind of that time, and I was just like, this is really not what I want. And so it was the first thing that I'd ever quit in my life, and it was a really hard pill to swallow. It's still kind of tough to think about. Like, it would have been cool to be like, oh, I was a Green Beret.
Yeah.
And it's a hard story to explain to people and be like, well, I almost was. Almost. And it's like, no, either you were or you weren't. And I truly was not. But I truly found out what it was about. I have a ton of respect for it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And there was this deep secret underneath that was underlying. At any moment, I was waiting for somebody to call me in and say, where did you commission? Did you do ROTC? And I was like, no. Did you do West Point? No. Did you do, green to gold? No. So you're a direct commission,
Right.
And then
somebody was going to find you out.
Well, and my unit knew that, and I worried that when I got back to my unit that I would be this extremely overtrained, well, you're a Green Beret, but we can't have you take a command of a team.
Yeah.
So we're going to put you in the S shop, and you can help with some medical stuff. So if we do a mission, we'll send you, and you can set up the rear support medical clinic.
Right.
But you're a Green Beret, so we think you're cool. And I was just like, am I even going to get this prize at the end of being able to lead an ODA? And I was extremely afraid to ask that question, because I was afraid they were going to send me home.
Yeah.
And so it was a really, really tough. I mean, it's still a decision that I think about, not every day by any means, but it's just one of those where I've thought about. I mean, it was what was right for me and my family, and it's been understandable, and it's been, it is what it is. So.
I remember my struggle with my desire to enter the special operations community. And so 19th Special Forces has a detachment in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And I was in the West Virginia Guard as a flight medic. And in 2005 to about 2006, I was working on the southwest border when the National Guard was helping shore up our border with Mexico, and I was working with this old crusty CW3 Vietnam vet Green Beret, and um, let let's just describe the border mission as a mess from start to finish. Um,
Yeah.
what you and I would consider traditional S shops, uh,
Yeah.
the admin shops, we just kind of said, well, you're an E5 and you used to be a clerk, so now you get to run S6,
Yeah.
right? Or J6, or you used to work admin, so now you get to work this shop. So
S1.
like, and it was a total mess. And I remember when I showed up in July of 2006, they're like, we don't have any medical presence. I'm like, all right, cool. So we were being supported by Fort Bliss, and I stood up all the medical stuff for us. And then this old warrant officer came. He's like, this place is a joke. Maybe I should just go back to West Virginia and go shoot bad guys again. I really took an interest in that. I'm like, wait a sec, like I had never met anybody up to that point who was so open about their experience in killing people.
Yeah.
and he was really fascinating. And I talked to him. He's like, hey, you're with that aviation unit out of Parkersburg. You should go interview. They give you some good training. Your old first sergeant was with us. And I said, yeah, he was with you guys. I'm like, I don't know that he'd sign off or give his blessing. And he goes, let me call him. I'll talk to him. And like 12 hours later, this old warrant officer gives me a call and he says, hey, I've set you up an interview. We're going to put you on leave. We're going to cut you orders to go back to West Virginia and go interview with the sergeant major out there. And I'm like, what? Wait, what? Like I hadn't even truly expressed a desire to
Yeah.
to go. And this old chief, he's like, no, wait, we need you. We need you. So I went out and interviewed, and they put me on TDY and sent me back to West Virginia, to just outside of Beckley, to go and interview with this sergeant major. He's like, so why are you here? I'm like, the chief said that this would be a good thing. And he's like, I don't really know what to do with you. He's like, we don't have any slots for you. We could put you in the med shed. We can make you a 68 Sierra, which is like a group like sanitation specialist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, like that. Like, so when I came home from the border at the very end of 2006, I came back to my air ambulance company and dabbled around with going down on the training team to PT with them and kind of get used to the concept of the SF mentality and the SF structure. And I went and I did one drill with them, and I'm like, peace out, guys. This is not this is not what I wanted. This is not what I envisioned. At that point, I was actively trying to get married. It just wasn't. It didn't line up with what I wanted.
Yeah.
And then when I moved from West Virginia to Utah in 2009, there was that special operations company, and they're like, well, we can make you a special operations medic. Like, I've already been a flight medic. Like, I've been there and done that. Like, I've done the cool guy stuff. I just want to finish out a contract and kind of be done.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, there's a linguist unit in Logan. You can go with them. I'm like, sweet. So I ended up in a military intelligence company here in Logan. And shortly after I linked up with them, there was a guy, and I can't remember his name. He expressed all this interest about wanting to go SF, and he was in college at Utah State. And nobody in the company, like everybody in the company was like, oh, I know an SF guy. Like nobody had ever had any real experience or doings with the SF.
Yeah.
And with the way, well, back in West Virginia, because our first sergeant was a former SF guy, our air ambulance company got tagged all the time to go and help support 19th stuff in the state.
Yeah.
So we had really close working relationships with real deal Green Beret operators. I am not a Green Beret. I am not an operator. I'm not an SF guy. I want to make that incredibly clear. Like, in no way, shape, or form have I been or am I special forces. Okay.
Yeah.
So, having worked with these guys, like, you grow relationships, you get a peek into the mindset, but that's not a whole picture. So I pull this guy aside and kind of take him under my wing, and I'm like, hey, just know and understand this is going to be one of the hardest experiences of your life. And at some point, you're going to have to sit down with yourself and say, this is where I'm at now. Where do I want to be in a year, 5 years, 10 years down the way?
Yeah.
And he didn't have a girlfriend at the time. He had no commitments. He had nothing. It was just, he was a bachelor dude. And I remember he got his bags packed, and for whatever reason, I was on some kind of guard bum orders. And I remember I drove him down to Camp Williams so that they could, I guess, take possession of him and send him to selection.
Yeah.
And I dropped him off and I gave him a big hug and I wished him the best of luck. And, a month and a half later, he came back, he graduated selection, been selected, and he was just waiting to be able to transfer out of this MI unit and officially go to the 19th. And it might have been one of my proudest moments of my military career was welcoming that guy back after he'd been selected and congratulating him and just, seeing that he really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But I just remember my struggle of like, do I want to do cool guy stuff? This isn't really what I wanted. This isn't what I asked for, but here I am anyway. And I look back on it now and I'm like, God, I could have been so much cooler. I could have been so much cooler. But
I think the biggest takeaway for me was that mindset, and that kind of led into like other things that I did and like chose to do and become, and kind of my involvement in the community now. Of just that mindset of that, like, one is you master the basics, and then two is you don't let anything stop you and that drive that you have. And so that has been, my biggest takeaway, and just the gratitude of coming home from Iraq alive, and the guys who didn't, it's almost shameful if you talk to somebody and they complain and they just don't make the best of their life, and they make crappy decisions, and you're just like, dude, you had the opportunity, man. Like, you understand. A lot of these guys didn't, get this opportunity, and now you have it. And it's one of those deals of, what do you want to do, and why are you not doing it? And so, I mean, everything that I've done, when I came home from jump school, it was like, man, I really love jumping out of planes. So I went to Skydive Ogden. I was like, hey, I want to jump out of planes. And they're like, oh, we have to do this course. I was like, all right, let's do it. And they're like, well, do you like, show me the pamphlet, man. Sure, show me the pamphlet. Okay, here's my card. Like, do we do this now, or like, when are we starting this?
Yeah.
And so having that mentality and that drive of like, once you understand what you want to do and just being able to do it, and selection was hard, and it was probably the hardest military school I've ever, I guess it's really not a school, but I mean, it's 3 weeks of just
hell,
of suck. And so, but I mean, you realize through a lot of that and through some of the other courses and stuff, it was just like, yeah, you just keep doing this if that's what you want to do. And so you've already proven and pushed yourself, and it wasn't, a lot of times you hear SEALs and they're like, it really pushed me further than I ever thought I could go. And that's why I think probably Hell Week and Buds is harder. Because there was never that point. I mean, there was a few times in like SEER school where you're just like, this really
Sucks.
When you're getting sprayed with a hose and you're naked and cold and stuff like that. But you knew that was all going to be temporary, and you knew the end date of the school was coming. But realistically, there wasn't a time where I was just like, this is just, I thought I couldn't go any further, and then I had to go further. Maybe there was a point on the last ruck during selection, they have you do, I mean, ours was over 30 miles of like a run jog, and we were in little groups. I mean, that was harder than any endurance race I had done, and I was pretty broken from the school. I mean, everybody was, don't get me wrong, nobody was on fresh legs or anything. And so there was some of that kind of pushed me to an extent on my physical, limit. But I never felt that whole, oh, man, I've gone through this. I could do anything. I felt like things could always have been a little bit harder. But at the same time, it just really changed that mindset of do the most with what you have. And I think it's that mindset that I developed there that actually led to me not graduating. To be honest, it was that mindset of like, I want to do the most with what I have in my opportunity. And this doesn't really fit in with what I want to do. And it was one of those, this would be really cool. But was I out there just to get a Green Beret and to say that I had done something? And, with that honest conversation of, I had a hard time going home to the family and putting them through that just so I could say, yeah, your dad was a Green Beret, you know, so I get to have a cool plaque on the wall in my office with whatever career I choose after that. So, so there was a lot behind it, but that mentality has driven me on the other things that I've done. And there's a great opportunity. There's a book by the youngest Medal of Honor winner. And he talks about a point when he's going through his recovery. He jumped on a grenade to kind of save his buddies that were right next to him. And he talked about this, and I've kind of experienced a little bit, nothing compared to what he went through, but his whole mindset changed once he went skydiving. And I have this every time I go skydive, and I probably have 350 jumps, but it's always the drive home, from Ogden. I'm always just driving home, and it's almost like the rest of the world just slows down. And you were just traveling, 120 to 160 miles an hour towards the earth with your life in your own hands, controlling every aspect of your life, of whatever you do moment. Could be the end of your life, or it could be this enjoyable experience. And so to have that control and to have that, it just made everything else, just all that adrenaline, just everything else just kind of slows down, and you say, yeah, the stuff that you stressed out about before, and it really put things in perspective of, man, that stuff's not that bad. Like, we have things that are really, really great, and that epiphany of jumping out of a plane, it's kind of a weird thing that we do as humans, but it simplifies your life, and it really kind of puts things back into perspective because you were going through, what you were going through. And it changed his perspective in the book. And he talks about, he was a Marine, and he was so worried about, am I going to recover? Am I going to do this? And will I be able to do this again? And there was all this stress. And once he went skydiving, and he didn't care anymore, and he meant it by like, if something happens to me, then it happens to me. And it just really reset his mentality. And so skydiving's been that part of my life of like, why am I stressed about these other things? Like, life is here to enjoy. I was just flying through the air at 120 miles an hour. Like, this guy cutting me off in traffic, like, does not
Means
matter.
nothing.
And so to live your life upset like that is just, you know, why get busy living, you know what I mean? And so that's always been a huge thing for me now that I've kind of learned through a lot of that. So it's been, I mean, it molded me and put me where I'm at today. And I still love skydiving, and I still do anything that I want to do. And if I kind of put my mind to it, then it happens. And that's where
Well,
we're at, you know.
Jake, I want to thank you for your time. We're butting right up on an hour here. I would love to have you back for a part two to talk about your work with veterans. We didn't get around
Yeah.
to it today, but boy, this was really fun, and I appreciate your time, and you know, appreciate your service and your hard work. For those watching, like, subscribe, comment, share, comment down below, all that fun stuff. Help me pay my bills. Thanks, folks.